Crown of Thorns and Desire. Previous episodes are available on playlist. A link is given in the video description. Episode 9. My God, it's you. He looked equally surprised, his lake blue eyes sparkling for a moment. Gianna, I can't believe we meet again. Are you here to buy something too? Yes, the chocolate here is very good. He nodded and glanced at the counter, where some pastry samples and wrapped chocolate bars were displayed. Hello, sir, what would you like to order? The clerk asked politely. Please give me a cup of coffee. He took a white porcelain cup and sat down across from Kenyi, starting a conversation with her. After a few casual exchanges, he suddenly took out a red velvet box and gently placed it in front of her. I have a small gift for you, he smiled at Kenyi, to thank you for saving my friend on the train. No, I can't accept this. Kenyi hurriedly refused. Why not open it and take a look? I guarantee you'll like it. No, it's fine, I can't accept it, thank you. Look, a pair of earrings, they would suit you perfectly. He opened the box himself, and she watched his movements, her dark eyes brightening as the box gradually opened. Do you think it's not expensive enough? No, that's not it. She had indeed received more expensive gifts, like a platinum necklace set with diamonds, but she really liked these pearl earrings. Compared to the dazzling diamonds, she preferred the gentle luster and smooth curves of pearls. I don't know if I should say this to you, he lowered his voice slightly, looking directly at her, but I've kept it with me, hoping that one day when I meet you, I could give it to you. I never expected this wish to come true. Kenyi was momentarily stunned. She didn't know how to refuse such a request. His sincerity made her silent acceptance seem like agreement. In a daze, she accepted the gift. All right, thank you. She placed the small velvet box into her handbag. You are like a pearl, pure, bright, and endearing. His lake blue eyes sparkled. Unlike their last encounter on the train, she was wearing a long light blue dress with delicate ruffles at the sleeves and neckline today, topped with a hat adorned with ribbon trim. Her fair skin resembled that of a porcelain doll, smooth and delicate, with a petite nose and charming lips. Besides her attire, there was one notable difference. Today, her cheeks bore a faint blush like a delicate sunset. Kenyi felt somewhat uneasy under his gaze, lowering her head, her small chin buried in the lace of her collar. His goodwill was so evident yet unspoken, he hadn't confessed anything to her. However, if she were to refuse him outright now, it would seem overly sensitive. He sat just across from her, less than 2 meters away, close enough to see his handsome face, high nose, and gentle gaze. Yet he wouldn't press her, maintaining a comfortable and safe distance. Have you seen your lover? Is he well? Marcus took a sip of coffee, his tone as if inquiring about a close friend. She nodded slightly, suddenly recalling her lie, casually saying he was a farmer, and now trying to backtrack. He is just very busy, there's a lot to do on the farm since it's spring. Kanye blinked her dark eyes frequently, struggling to continue. She admitted she wasn't good at lying. He nodded in agreement, his slightly squinted lake blue eyes radiating a soft light. Yes, it's spring. Marcus, why did you enlist? After pondering for a long time, she finally asked. Gianna, I remember you asked me this question. He smiled at her with just his eyes. Did you forget on the train? Did I? She was taken aback. In fact, I didn't really want to enlist. Perhaps I would be better suited to be a poet or a musician, as you suggested. A faint smile curved his lips, and he chuckled lightly. If I could write poetry and compose music. Oh. She looked at him, clearly misunderstanding him, judging him solely by her impression and making a mistake based on appearances. Yet she remained somewhat curious about him. Is it due to family tradition that the younger generation enlists? Actually, when my second brother graduated from the Army Command School, I was still very young. I only knew that he looked very heroic in his uniform and that he was excellent with a gun. He was the pride of my father, unlike my eldest brother, who was obsessed with the arts and did nothing. As for me, he suddenly paused, something flickering in his lowered lake blue eyes. By the way, how is Teddy? She's doing well, eating and sleeping all day, with nothing else to do. Kanye smiled, realizing she was the same way. And she really likes you. She has a pair of big, dark eyes, so gentle and kind. What a delightful little creature. Ah! Kanye looked up at him, seeing him smile at her. His words didn't seem like mere praise for a little dog. Evelyn suddenly burst in, first glancing at the handsome captain sitting in the chair, then turning her gaze to Kanye. Gianna, we should go. Let me see you off. Marcus stood up from his chair. No, it's fine, the car is waiting for me outside. Kanye declined his kindness again. Thank you. Then I can only hope to see you again. He stood in place, not insisting on escorting her home. Evelyn took one arm with a basket in one hand and pulled her toward the shop door. Kanye turned back to glance at him. The handsome man still smiled at her with his eyes. Marcus sat back down in his chair, his lake blue eyes watching the two girls hurriedly exit and climb into a black car, where a driver in grey civilian clothes quickly started the engine. This luxurious black Mercedes didn't have military plates. He raised his head and finished the coffee in his cup. He was off on a business trip again, but this time he had been very clear with her about his whereabouts before leaving, even giving her an exact time when he would return next weekend. He was going to a southern city to prepare for a meeting scheduled for September. The world is so ironic. I just arrived in the capital, and he is leaving again. Kanye leaned back in her lounge chair, fiddling with a bouquet of roses submerged in a glass vase, freshly cut and still budding. A little separation is sweeter than a newlywed's bliss, you must believe that." Evelyn smiled at her while busy changing the bed linens. "Evelyn, is your mother feeling any better?" "God bless, thanks to you and the sir's care. Because of that special permit, we managed to get some restricted effective medicine, along with the treatment costs and weekly leave." Evelyn's brown eyes were filled with gratitude. "That's wonderful. We have a saying in South Africa, 'Good people will surely be rewarded.' Just as you said, Miss Gianna, good people will be rewarded, and I believe God is watching over each of us from above." Kanye followed Evelyn's gaze to the night sky. Unlike the hustle and bustle of the city, the night here was quiet. There were few boats passing on the Javier River, only a few stars twinkling in the dark sky, accompanied by a bright full moon. Kanye took a few steps, clasped her hands together, and leaned her upper body on the half-moon-shaped marble windowsill. She didn't believe in Christianity and wasn't sure if there really were gods and angels in this world. She remembered the stories her mother told her sisters at home, about a cassia tree on the moon and a palace in the moon where the goddess lived. "The bright moon shines before my bed, I suspect it's frost on the ground. I raise my head to gaze at the bright moon, and lower it to think of my hometown." This was a poem she had memorized since childhood, easy to recite, but reciting it as a traveler brought a different bittersweet flavor. Half a year had passed since she bid farewell to her life at the art school. It was time to send a message of safety to her family. "Evelyn, could you do me a favor?" She looked at the waiting maid. "Tomorrow is the weekend. When you go home to take care of your mother, could you stop by the telegraph office and help me send a telegram?" "Of course," Evelyn immediately nodded in agreement. "Who do you want to send it to?" "It's to my friend in America. Here's the address and the message." She took out a small notebook from the second drawer of the cabinet, flipped through a few pages, and pulled out a slip of paper. Evelyn took it, reading it over. "But this is a family letter. Why send it to a friend?" "My parents don't know I've left America," Kanye said lightly, though her mood grew heavy. If all went well, Brother Victor should have returned home by now, reporting her safety to their father and mother. Yet she still deceived her family, saying she was continuing her studies at university in America. Her mother would naturally be saddened by their inability to meet, and her father would surely be pleased, thinking she had great ambitions. If she had become a nurse for the Red Cross, her understanding father would have forgiven her choice, but he would never agree to her being the mistress of a Nazi officer as she was now. With this thought, Kanye couldn't help but sigh, her heart a tangled mess, truly a situation that was hard to untangle. These troublesome matters could wait to be thought about later. She looked at Evelyn with her dark eyes, seeing the capable and loyal maid not pressing further, carefully folding the slip of paper with the message and address. This telegram would travel through several major cities in the world, from the imperial capital in Europe, across the ocean to America, and then to South Africa, where it would be received by an uncle working in the Foreign Affairs Bureau, who would forward it to her parents in South African. The bright moon spans 3,000 miles, how can I send my longing? Even with 1,000 words, the telegram can only convey a few phrases. All is well, do not worry. In the afternoon, she practiced her dance as usual, taking off her slightly sweaty shoes. The little dog, Teddy, who had been curled up on the floor, immediately woke up, pouncing on her to snatch her ballet shoes, dragging the ribbons in circles. Teddy, give me back my shoes. Kanye ran a few steps barefoot, bending down to tug at the shoes. The little creature let out a low woof sound, biting down hard and refusing to let go. Kanye raised her arm, about to gently tap its mouth, when suddenly it released its grip, turned around, and barked a few times at the glass window, wagging its tail, before darting out through the door. Wait, come back, Teddy. Kanye hurriedly slipped on her shoes, opened the back door, and chased after it, only to see the little dog sprinting into the woods. In the blink of an eye, the little creature had disappeared from sight, and Kanye felt a bit anxious. The backyard of the house was a neatly trimmed lawn, and further in was a dense forest. She had never ventured into those woods alone, she had only walked beside them one evening with him, and because of that guy's inappropriate request, she had ended up leaving one shoe there, which he had to carry back for her. That place led to the upstream of the river that flowed behind the house, where the bend of the lake was. She ran, slightly out of breath, and finally found Teddy under a large tree by the riverbank, where the little creature was playing with a black-tailed butterfly. You little rascal! You're too mischievous! Teddy didn't hear Kanye's scolding at all and continued to chase the butterfly, which fluttered its beautiful wings higher. The puppy barked anxiously at it, and Kanye couldn't help but laugh at its antics. The forest was beautiful, making one want to linger. The dappled light filtered through the trees, reflecting on the lake's surface like a layer of fine gold, dazzling her eyes. Kanye recalled a sunny afternoon in early spring this year by the Izar River in the Southern Empire, where there had been a splendid performance of grand ballroom dancing. Gianna, is that you? A gentle call brought her back from her sweet memories to the present. Ah! She gasped, turning around abruptly to see a man sitting on a branch of the large tree behind her. Don't be afraid, it's me. I hope I didn't scare you. He first gently lowered a backpack from the tree, then slid down a couple of steps and jumped down from the branch with a graceful motion, like a hunting leopard. Marcus! What are you doing here? Kanye recognized his face. He was a very handsome man, not wearing a blue trench coat but dressed like a field soldier in a jacket full of pockets. I'm photographing wildlife, look. He fiddled with the camera in his hands, demonstrating to her. This is my new treasure, an Exacta SLR camera, with a Zeiss lens. It can take color photos, right? Yes, it's in color. I didn't expect you to be such an expert. He smiled, this equipment isn't cheap. She looked at the camera in his hand. I don't understand this. Do you enjoy photography? I have many hobbies. Photography is just one of them. This time, my goal is to capture a series of photos of swans. There are many swans in the lake nearby. In the morning, when I look out the window, I can see some white birds on the distant lake, but they're too far away to see clearly. Then, would you like to come with me to take a look? He seized the opportunity to invite her. Now. Kanye looked down at her outfit. She had rushed out and was still wearing a white tulle ballet dress, which, although knee-length, was clearly not suitable for outdoor activities. Yes, right now. Don't worry, no walking or climbing, he said, leading her a few steps to a small boat docked by the river bank. We'll take the boat and row upstream, that's where we can get closest to the swans. Before she could agree, he was already on the boat, reaching out his hand to her. She didn't take his hand. Thank you, but I can manage on my own. Just as Kanye stepped onto the small boat, her balance was so good that she struggled to keep herself steady. Oh my, this little boat rocks so much. Suddenly, his strong, powerful hand grasped her small one. His palm was warm and solid, and he steadied her, helping her sit down on the boat. Thank you. The boat still swayed a bit, and Kanye, not being a strong swimmer, felt a bit dizzy on the bright lake surface. Don't be afraid, I'm here. She slightly blushed, sitting at one end of the small boat, gathering her white tulle dress. Teddy stood up, its front paws resting on the edge of the boat, curiously looking down at the lake. He gently paddled, and the boat gradually moved upstream, going slowly as he had to row while clearing the hanging vines and branches on either side for her. Ah, over there, look! There are a few swans on the grass by the river bank. Kanye exclaimed. He quickly took out his camera and snapped a few photos. Kanye couldn't help but exclaim, so beautiful. The swans we see often only show their beauty, but we often overlook that they are a symbol of fidelity. When faced with danger, the male swan protects its mate and offspring. Males and females pair for life, and if one unfortunately dies, the other will live in solitude until old age. Because of this trait, people use swans to symbolize pure love, and those poets who excel in praising love. Kanye nodded, softly replying, Shakespeare the Swan of Avon, silently thinking of the ideal love of being faithful and never abandoning one another. Yes, Shakespeare. In literature and art, there are many references to swans. In your homeland, what do swans represent? Her dark eyes turned, pondering for a moment before answering. The sparrow knows not the ambition of the swan, it should symbolize integrity and lofty aspirations. I think, regardless of the cultural context, swans are pure beings. Their beauty comes from their unblemished nature. He gazed at her, his blue eyes as clear as the shallow lake water, rippling with clarity. Teddy kept barking at them, and the group of quiet birds, unable to tolerate the unexpected guest's disturbance, flapped their wings and took flight. He had no choice but to maneuver the small boat to the shore. "I really shouldn't have brought it on the boat, it made it impossible for you to take photos. I managed to capture a series of photos of the swans taking off, in fact, I had already taken many before." "Ah, it's starting to rain." Kenyi wiped a damp spot from her cheek, looking up at the sky. First, a few drops fell, then gradually increased. The rain became fine and dense, soaking into her white tulle dress. He quickly took off his jacket and held it over her head, like a makeshift rain shelter. He was only wearing a striped shirt without a tie, and he quickened his rowing speed. Kenyi had grown accustomed to this kind of treatment, holding his jacket, and softly murmured. "The weeping willow's color grows deeper, flying smoke curls mist, playing with the gentle wind. The fragrant grass spreads lush green, soaking the peach blossoms delicate red. The rain nourishes things with intention, unspoken, it works its magic. A plow divides the spring furrows, only to comfort the farmer's longing gaze." "That's really nice, Gianna. Was that a poem you just recited?" "Spring rain." Marcus's brown eyebrows slightly furrowed, but what you just said didn't mention the word rain at all. Kenyi smiled with a hint of pride. "That's the beauty of literature, subtle and profound. If some things are stated too directly, they lose their aesthetic appeal. Forgive me for being blunt, but why take so many detours when a straight path can lead to the destination?" "Well, I can't quite explain that either. As the ancients said, in being a person, one should be straightforward, but in writing poetry, one should be indirect. Writing should be nuanced, but in life, it's better to be honest and straightforward." "I completely agree with that. I hope we can be sincere with each other." His lake blue eyes gazed deeply into hers. She nodded, offering him a faint smile, gazing back at him intently. "By the way, how are you and your partner getting along? When I saw you in the shop that day, if I'm not mistaken, you were preparing to celebrate his birthday." At the mention of him, Kenyi's face quickly flushed. He has been away for a few days. He has some estates to manage in the south." Marcus nodded. "I see. So, are you two planning to get married?" "Marriage? Well, I haven't thought about that yet." She shook her head, feeling a bit flustered, her face turning even redder. He took in all her expressions, blinking his lake blue eyes, and smiled. "Actually, you don't need to be shy." "Why not?" "If it were me, facing such a lovely girl, I would definitely want to marry her as soon as possible." She was taken aback, and then he continued, "Just a joke, I hope you don't mind." Kenyi lowered her head, falling silent. Teddy also quieted down, obediently lying at her feet. When the rain stopped, he paddled the boat back the way they came, landing on the riverbank where they had first set off, then escorting her through the woods and across the lawn to the fence outside the back door of the white marble villa. Kenyi leaned against the wrought iron gate, looking back at him, softly asking, "Evelyn left some cake when she left. Would you like to come in for a cup of coffee?" A black Mercedes sedan drove along the tree-lined path, the driver occasionally glancing back. "I'm very sorry, General. Your private plane landed early, it was our oversight in preparation." "No need to explain, I didn't mean to blame you. Arriving a day early was a last-minute arrangement on my part." A man in a sharply tailored uniform sat in the back seat, his expression very stern, with a high nose and tightly closed lips, appearing somewhat serious. However, the deep-set ice-blue eyes sparkled with a gentle light. The driver fell silent, focusing on driving. He glanced at the officer in the rear-view mirror, pressed the accelerator, and increased speed. He looked out the car window, watching the tall trees rush by on either side of the road. The warm, slightly dry spring breeze flowed in through the window, and he instinctively leaned back against the seat. The black uniform made his figure appear so upright even when relaxed. Today, he wasn't wearing the large cross medal, just two insignias decorated with oak leaves. He raised his arm, using his long fingers to unfasten the collar button, letting out a sigh. The new uniform felt a bit tight around his neck. On the seat beside him lay a black briefcase and a beautifully crafted paper box with the logo of a pastry shop on it, containing a box of authentic Black Forest cake. On the outside of the cake box, a lace ribbon tied into a bow held a red rose. After spending a pleasant afternoon with this handsome man, Kenyi began to feel distracted by evening, as tomorrow was the day he was supposed to return. Whenever they discussed any topic, her eyes would occasionally glance at the large grandfather clock in the hall, wondering when he would call tonight to confirm his exact return time. The other party was very considerate, having only a cup of coffee and staying for less than half an hour before taking the initiative to leave. Kenyi got up from the sofa to see him to the door. Marcus politely bid her farewell, gazing at her with his lake blue eyes, smiling as he gently took her hand and brought it to his lips, brushing against it. The moment his lips touched the back of her hand, Kenyi's face felt instantly flushed and hot, and she quickly withdrew her hand. This was a form of etiquette used only in high society during formal social occasions, a sign of respect from a gentleman to a lady of noble status. She stood at the door, somewhat dazed, watching his tall figure descend the stairs, walk out through the wrought iron gate adorned with rose patterns, and disappear at the end of the green corridor. The next morning, Kenyi personally took charge, leading several servants to decorate the entire house with fresh flowers, and had the chef prepare a sumptuous dinner. However, until late at night, there was still no sign of his return. After a sleepless night filled with worry, on the morning of the third day, Kenyi urged Evelyn again to call his office to inquire about the situation. What did his secretary say? Kenyi asked, looking at the maid who had just hung up the phone. Evelyn's disappointed expression spoke volumes. They said they still haven't received any notification and are unclear about where the general has gone. How could this be? Kanye bit her lip in confusion. He had clearly stated in their previous phone call that he would return on the weekend evening, even mentioning that they would have dinner together and that he had bought her a small gift. He rarely went back on his word and would not make promises lightly, but once he made a promise, he would definitely keep it. Could it be that he encountered danger on the way? I heard from a servant that yesterday evening, there were tire tracks on the muddy road in front of the gate. This place is quite remote, and aside from the master's special car, it's unlikely that any other vehicles would pass by. Kanye's eyes widened as she looked at the maid, her heart skipping a beat. Are you saying he might have returned? Just yesterday evening. I can't be sure, Evelyn shook her head. That's why I didn't tell you at the time. Kanye lowered her head, pondering for a moment, then snatched the phone from Evelyn's hand and dialed the butler's internal line. Is this Mr. Long? Please prepare a car for me, I need to go into town immediately. Gianna, where are you going? Evelyn chased her into the foyer. Kanye had already put on a purple short coat and was slipping into her black high heels as she replied, he won't answer my calls, it must be because he misunderstood my relationship with Marcus. I need to clarify this matter. Wait, Gianna, you can't go. Evelyn ran after her to the door, and when she saw Kanye already getting into the car, the maid looked at the car's departing shadow and continued the sentence she hadn't finished. It's dangerous out there, especially for you. In the city center, there stood a 3-story building that looked unremarkable, much like other government buildings, with several black and red flags hanging from it. Only at the entrance of the foyer was there a guard post, with 2 soldiers wearing helmets and carrying rifles standing outside, looking rather relaxed. A black Mercedes parked by the roadside near the square. Kanye sat in the car, gazing at the entrance of the office building from a distance. It seemed that everyone entering had to show some special identification, regardless of whether they were in plain clothes or wearing black uniforms. Oh my God, what should I do? Kanye anxiously looked around. The driver in the front seat turned around and gently said, Miss Gianna, we should go back, it's hard to get in here. Do you have a way? Mr. Long, we need a pass, or even one of those metal badges should work. She recalled seeing such a badge when she was searched by several plainclothes police officers at the downtown hotel. She remembered that those plainclothes officers exchanged badges with the guards, but at that time, Captain Kevin, who was responsible for security, was no longer by her side. The driver smiled slightly but shook his head helplessly. Then this is the only way left. You wait here for me, I'll go to the phone booth and call him to let him know I'm downstairs at his office. Kanye said firmly, she wouldn't resort to this method unless absolutely necessary. Wait, Miss Gianna, please don't do anything rash. The driver was about to stop her when Kanye had already opened the car door and was preparing to get out, only to see a lieutenant in a black uniform jogging towards the car from 10 meters away. My God, it's really you. What are you doing here? This handsome, slightly slender man had a pair of sharp green eyes that revealed an unmistakable surprise. Lieutenant Jacob! Kanye exclaimed as if she had seen a savior. I want to see him. I know he has returned. I suspect he came back to the villa yesterday but didn't go inside and just disappeared, refusing to answer my calls. I think he must have misunderstood something. Please, Lieutenant, take me to see him. I need to explain in person. Lieutenant Jacob hesitated for a few seconds, fully aware that the moment this girl appeared, he would be facing a very tricky situation. However, he also understood her stubbornness and determination. He gazed at her deeply, then climbed into the passenger seat, closed the door, pointed to the road ahead, and told the driver, "Turn left at the next block, we'll drive in through the back." "Thank you." Kanye looked gratefully at his back and thanked him. Every time she encountered a crisis, she always had to trouble him for help. Soon, under his direction, the car circled around to the back of the building. "Do you know where this place is?" Lieutenant Jacob turned his head, looking at Kanye in the back seat, lowering his voice. "You stay here, don't get out of the car." He got out swiftly and walked to the guard at the back door, who was evidently very familiar with him, even skipping the formalities. However, he still showed his identification and whispered a few words in the guard's ear. The guard opened the barrier and let the car through. The car drove into the yard and found a spot to park. The driver stayed in the car while Kanye followed Lieutenant Jacob through a small door at the back of the building, passing through a small hallway and climbing a winding staircase to a small room at the end of the corridor on this floor. He invited Kanye into the room and closed the door tightly. "Gianna, you stay here. I will go inform the general, but I can't guarantee he will see you right away." She nodded, watching Lieutenant Jacob leave the room. In this small room, she paced back and forth. It seemed to be a small reception room, lacking an office desk and filing cabinets, with only a tea table and a long bench, a few small cabinets, and 2 windowsills each holding a pot of green plants with drooping leaves. Looking out the window, she could see the yard where vehicles were parked, including the black Mercedes that had brought her here, along with several other cars, one of which bore the SS002 license plate, his frequently used vehicle. Lieutenant Jacob was gone for quite a while. When he returned, he found the beautiful Eastern girl quietly sitting in the chair waiting for him. His green eyes glanced at her while also checking the wall clock. "You might have to wait a little longer, there's an important meeting at 10. Will he see me?" She nodded, standing up and following Lieutenant Jacob a few steps behind. Just as he was about to speak, the phone on the cabinet rang. He picked up the receiver and spoke a few words softly inside, casting a fleeting glance at her. Kanye understood his meaning and immediately sat back down quietly. He hung up the phone and hurriedly left the room again. After waiting for another hour, Kanye could hardly contain herself. She heard footsteps in the hallway, estimating that the meeting had ended. She cautiously pushed the door open a crack and saw several officers in black uniforms walking by at the other end of the corridor, along with men in black jackets and caps. These must be his subordinates, just like the agent she had encountered on the train. Kenyi quickly closed the door, suddenly frozen. Among the two figures that had just flashed by in the hallway, one looked familiar. How could it be? That person just now seemed to be Professor Brown. She muttered to herself as she pushed the door open, only to see a figure disappearing around the corner. She quickened her pace to follow. The man had stopped at the staircase, turning sideways to converse with a nearby officer. This time, she saw clearly. It was undoubtedly Professor John Brown. She had actually seen Professor Brown here. However, he no longer looked like a disheveled art teacher but was dressed in a crisp black uniform, his silver hair slicked back neatly, standing upright, with polished boots and a slightly worn holster. Even his accent had changed, his heavy, abrupt Bavarian dialect had transformed into authentic bureaucratic speech. Every move he made told her he was no longer a professor or an artist but an officer of the Empire. She could also tell from his epaulets that he held the rank of captain, which was not a small title. The man finally noticed her gaze and turned his head warily. His silver eyes locked onto Kenyi's, and he froze for a moment, staring at her for several seconds, clearly surprised to encounter her in this place. This moment of shock only strengthened Kenyi's resolve. She could not forget that this nearly 60-year-old man had once caressed the wolf tattoo on his chest in front of a mirror, saying in a tone as if singing a hymn, "Isn't this the most beautiful? I see resilience and tenacity in you. Professor Brown, is it you?" She stared at his astonished face. He was flushed, having just been smiling and chatting intimately with his colleagues, looking more like a middle-aged man under 50 than a 60-year-old. "Miss, what are you talking about? I think you've mistaken me for someone else." He quickly reined in his slightly flustered expression, even neglecting to bid farewell to the bewildered officer he had been speaking with, turning to leave down the stairs. Kenyi chased after him, but he moved quickly, and by the time she reached the staircase, he had already vanished from sight. Yet she was certain she had not made a mistake. In the narrow corridor, the black-clad figures passing by cast her strange, scrutinizing glances. She could not care less about the awkwardness of being stared at in such a way. Her mind felt blank, the recent events leaving her in a daze. Professor Brown was the spy he had planted at Samuel Art School. Did this mean that her every move had long been under his close surveillance? She had thought herself fortunate, but the reality was the opposite. She had never escaped his control. Memories replayed in her mind, recalling the time he had pinned her down on the bed, attempting to assault her, yet pretended to let her go when an aide came in to report, "The mountain eagle has found the cat." This was their code. A few days later, Irina, disguised as a maid, had appeared, and after that great fire, Irina had vanished without a trace. Perhaps he had killed her, or perhaps he had captured her. At this moment, Kanye had no intention of getting involved in either side's stance. Her greatest concern was for her brother Victor's whereabouts. As she stood at the staircase, lost in thought, the worst situation unfolded. Lieutenant Jacob, who had just escorted a few officers down the stairs from the third-floor meeting room, spotted her standing at the second-floor staircase. He immediately realized he had made a serious mistake and rushed over to grab her arm, attempting to lead her away. "What are you doing standing here? Come with me." Kanye ignored Lieutenant Jacob, her dark gaze fixed on the tall, slender man in a crisp black uniform surrounded by several senior officers. Although the uniform was not extravagant, the two oak leaf insignias on the standing collar indicated his rank, and his overly handsome face did not quite match that of a general. She knew he was feigning calmness, staring at her silently after a moment of surprise, locking eyes with her for a brief moment. His ice blue eyes flickered, looking towards Lieutenant Jacob, who understood his meaning and quickly stepped forward, forcibly pulling her away. He did not make her wait long. Almost at the same time Captain Jacob stepped out. He entered the small reception room and closed the door behind him. "What are you doing here?" He stood 3 steps away from her, seemingly suppressing his anger, and said in a low voice, "You should know what this place is." Kanye did not hear his words and was too preoccupied with his displeasure. Just like in the corridor moments ago, she stared intently into his eyes, her dark eyes shimmering with something crystalline. He was taken aback by her gaze, his lips twitching slightly, and his tone unconsciously softened. "What? What do you want to say? Why did you lie to me?" she finally asked, her voice choked. His ice blue eyes fixed on her, not understanding her meaning. "Professor John Brown, he is the spy you planted at Samuel Art School, right?" She asked each word deliberately, her tone not forceful, yet resonating with conviction. He was stunned, his clear pupils suddenly widening, the corners of his eyes twitching rapidly. This sudden question caught him off guard, as he was usually quick-witted. He was not entirely clear about what had happened just moments ago in the corridor, but her words explained her actions and her current emotional outburst, while also revealing that she had inadvertently stumbled into his headquarters and seen something she should not have. In fact, he is not the only spy. The chef in the villa is one too. He is not really Italian. The driver is also one. He is just like those 2 guards at the hotel door. The gardener is one, and the maid who does odd jobs is one too. Everyone is. They might be promising young officers, but you sent them to spy on your lover. Faced with her barrage of accusations, his brows furrowed tighter, his lips pressed into a thin line, trembling slightly, but she did not give him a chance to speak. "Your network of spies is spread across the country, your dark hands reach everywhere, infiltrating every corner of this nation. Fine, that's your job, but why treat me like this?" Everything has been meticulously plotted by you. You pretended to let me go, only to plant spies to follow me. You went to such lengths to deceive and humiliate me, to see how I would submit to you. Enough, he intended to interrupt her, but seeing the tears streaming down her dark eyes, he was momentarily speechless. The one who should say that is me. I've had enough of this life. All around me are spies, nothing but spies, all I see are conspiracies. I live forever in a shroud of darkness. Perhaps I should thank Professor Brown, no, Captain John Brown, or whatever other name. In any case, he made me see your true face, she sobbed as she accused him, her voice hoarse and choked. Are you accusing me? If I had intended to hide something, have you been completely honest with me? His ice blue eyes stared at her, watching her tears continue to fall like rain. She paused, knowing exactly what he was referring to. It must be that he had discovered her interactions with Marcus. But she believed she had done nothing wrong against him. On the contrary, he had been watching her, manipulating everything from the shadows. You've known about my acquaintance with Marcus for a long time, haven't you? Since that agent passed me a note on the train, you must know every word I exchanged with him, every action I took. He interrupted her, turning away, avoiding her gaze, something flickering in his ice blue eyes. I'm not interested in that, nor do I want to argue with you here. This is my office. If you have questions, we can discuss them when I return, he said, and as soon as he finished speaking, he quickly walked to the cabinet, picked up the phone, and decisively ordered, Jacob, come in immediately. Captain Jacob arrived promptly. He didn't even look up, turning his back to her, yet accurately issued orders to his subordinate, take her back. Miss Gianna, please come with me, Captain Jacob said to her, his black uniform sleeve blocking her view. Kanye stood still, her dark eyes filled with tears. His tall, black-clad figure gradually became blurred in her vision, and she felt a surge of grievances, anger, and questions that she wanted to voice but could not. With the support of the stern SS captain, she stumbled out of the room. He adjusted his insignia, stepping out of the small reception room, crossing the narrow corridor. The warm midday sun shone through the glass windows along the corridor, illuminating him. His pace was quick as he returned to his office on the top floor, sitting behind the black writing desk. His desk was always tidy, with a lamp, a phone, a stationery box, and a schedule prepared by his secretary. He usually packed his schedule tightly, but this time, he had squeezed out a whole day from those tense appointments. With unprecedented anticipation, he hurriedly boarded a plane at the private airport, secretly landing in the capital, and drove back to the villa by the Havel River. He had intended to surprise that little woman. He admitted he was not good at creating surprises, but he just wanted to see her astonished expression. However, the moment the car pulled up in front of the gate, he realized what shock truly felt like. He was indeed shocked, even doubting his own eyes. This shy little woman, who would blush at the sight of any stranger, was standing at the villa's door with a man, bidding him farewell. The man wore a jacket and carried a professional camera bag, appearing broad-shouldered and tall, and he gentlemanly kissed her hand. After saying goodbye to the man, this beautiful petite woman did not immediately return inside but leaned against the door, standing there for a moment, seemingly lost in thought, before turning around with a radiant smile and going back inside. If it weren't for the driver being present, he might have been unable to restrain himself and would have confronted her directly. But this jealous anger only burned for a few seconds. His innate sensitivity told him this was not a simple romantic affair. The location of the villa he had chosen was already sufficiently secluded, and this woman was completely under his surveillance, with almost no opportunity for outside contact. He suddenly remembered that a few months ago, his subordinate had reported to him that on the train to the capital, her angelic compassion had led her to volunteer to make an announcement for help, saving an asthmatic patient, and thus she had met a captain from the National Defense Army, spending a night in his compartment. At that time, he hadn't paid much attention to it. Now, he quickly connected these two events in his mind. Moreover, there was one more thing, the most important one, that man had enchanting lake blue eyes. He saw that light from afar as he sat in the car, that gaze felt familiar. "Go back," he sat straight in the back seat, his expression dark, and whispered a command. The driver's expression was somewhat unusual, hesitating for a moment, but he immediately noticed that icy blue gaze sweeping over him in the rear-view mirror, causing the trained driver to break out in a cold sweat. He gripped the steering wheel, turned the car around, and drove the black Mercedes swiftly down the somewhat muddy road. He opened the first drawer of his desk, where a cowhide envelope lay, containing a photocopied document about the National Defense Army Captain Marcus Pearl, who had met her on the train and reappeared at the villa. His ice blue eyes scanned the information collected overnight by his subordinates, and his intuition proved correct. This man was not simply infatuated with the somewhat mysterious beautiful Eastern girl at first sight, appearing repeatedly by her side, showering her with attention and care. He was there for himself. The document indicated that Marcus Pearl came from a middle-class family with some prominence, tracing back to the 1520s. Aside from his family's military achievements, Marcus's father, Joseph Pearl, had also been a captain. Marcus was a graduate of the Army Officer School, an outstanding student with excellent credentials, currently a captain in the 5th Corps of the National Defense Army. Reports from spies within the military detailed his entire history and recent itinerary. He had a close combat medal and was currently on leave due to an appendicitis operation. Yet, from the man's demeanor, he did not appear to have undergone any surgery, a fact confirmed by spies at the 4th Military Hospital. The file also contained a photo of the Pearl family, featuring old Joseph Pearl and his 3 brothers. He carefully scrutinized the photo, where Marcus Pearl, with his lake blue eyes, was just a boy of a little over 10 years old. What truly caught his attention was the young man in military uniform on the left side of the photo. Cooper Pearl, he silently repeated the man's name in his mind. This man was young and handsome, with brown hair, a well-defined forehead, and striking features, exuding a heroic aura. Like his brother, Marcus Pearl, this man had lake blue eyes, the color of his pupils calm like autumn lake water. He placed the black and white photo on the desk, opened the drawer, took out a lighter, lit a cigarette, and walked to the window. There were too many memories he was reluctant to recall, including that of Lieutenant Cooper Pearl. Yet he still clearly remembered what Lieutenant Cooper Pearl had said to the new recruits of the cavalry regiment on a cold winter day at the training ground. He also remembered Cooper's flawless performance at the shooting range. He even recalled a cold night after fresh snow, when he led several assault team members to kick open the barracks door and bind the sleeping man in bed, directly delivering him to the commander. Unknowingly, the cigarette between his fingers had burned down. He fished out another cigarette from his pocket, flicked the lighter, and a blue flame ignited it. He took a deep drag, white smoke wafting gently from his nostrils. The most unforgettable memory of Lieutenant Cooper Pearl perhaps was not that night, with bright red blood and pale yellow brain matter splattered on the pure white snow like blooming plum blossoms, but rather when he had just enlisted, being locked in a dilapidated warehouse for 3 days and nights by some prankster veterans. It was Lieutenant Cooper who ordered his men to release him, and it was this man who first taught him how to use a gun. "Report, sir, may I come in?" A familiar male voice sounded from outside the door. He extinguished the cigarette, took 2 steps to the desk, quickly tucked the photo and documents into the drawer, and sat upright in the black chair, slightly raising his head and raising his tone to respond, "Come in." The door opened, and Captain Jacob walked straight in, holding a colorful paper box. "Do you have something to discuss?" He frowned and asked softly, his gaze fixed on the box in Jacob's hands. "I just delivered Miss Gianna back to the villa and handed her over to the butler, but her emotions are quite unstable," Captain Jacob reported seriously, then added, "General, I apologize for what happened earlier." "All right, I understand. You can return to work." He did not intend to hold this loyal subordinate accountable for the matter. Since it had already happened, discussing it further was pointless. What he needed most was some time alone to quietly think about how to handle this tricky situation. "This is something you left in the car." Jacob paused for a moment, carefully placing the box on the corner of the desk. It was a cake box with the slogan "Sweet, Delicious, Authentic" printed on it, adorned with a half-dried rose on the lace trim. He accepted Captain Jacob's gesture but waited a few seconds, still not seeing him leave. "Do you have anything else?" He fixed his gaze on Captain Jacob, his expression no longer gentle. "Forgive me for being blunt, General." Captain Jacob stepped forward, standing in front of the black desk. He knew this was a dangerous move, but he gathered his courage and said seriously, "Perhaps she is a good woman, but she is not suitable for you." He snorted coldly, a smile appearing at the corner of his lips, but his ice-blue eyes were filled with a chilling light. I guess you've wanted to say that for a long time. But don't you think your words contradict your actions? I did not authorize you to let her in. Sorry, General, I didn't expect Miss Gianna to encounter Lieutenant Roman here. Lieutenant Roman's promotion order was personally signed by the commander. He has been in the military since the last war, previously serving as the family orchestra conductor in naval intelligence, gathering valuable information while undercover in England, and thus received the Iron Cross. Enough. Are you saying he possesses the qualities of a professional spy? Lieutenant Andres Jacob, you placed such an easily captured fool in the art school? What I want is that Soviet female spy lurking in the occupied zone, that cunning cat. But how could the name Mountain Eagle appear on the opposition's list? Don't tell me he expects to uncover any truth in the security police's prison. Now this fool is swaggering around in this building. I'm very sorry, General, this is my negligence. Captain Jacob lowered his head, his expression grave. He had followed this man for 3 years and had never seen him so agitated. Perhaps he should have kept quiet, but the emotions surging in his chest compelled him to speak again. Please forgive me. In fact, I have reported to you more than once that he previously served in naval intelligence. Captain Jacob's words were only half finished, not because he was intimidated by the man's dark expression, but because he clearly understood that this man was seriously considering the entire situation. It's my poor judgment in personnel. I am willing to accept punishment. He lowered his ice-blue eyes. Are you done speaking? Put the box on the coffee table, and you may leave. Watching this efficient, slender subordinate leave, he could no longer contain the flames of anger in his chest. He abruptly stood up from behind the desk and walked to the window. This was the most secluded and highest room in the small building, allowing a view of Brussels Square through the narrow window. Across the square stood a magnificent building, its white marble walls shining in the sunlight, with an impressive entrance flanked by tall columns, the national flag, party flag, and military flag fluttering in the wind. That was the Imperial Navy Command. He stood straight at the window, coldly staring outside, but inside he felt extremely restless. His pocket was empty of cigarettes, and the temples of his head throbbed violently. If that man, Marcus Pearl, who harbored ulterior motives in approaching her, was a ticking time bomb, then his true opponent Flame Kyrus, a cunning and all-pervasive king of espionage, was the real sword hanging over his head. He drew the dark red curtains, plunging the room into darkness, and slowly walked along the black marble windowsill to the sofa. His long fingers inadvertently brushed against the ribbon tied around the paper box on the coffee table. Although the rose was somewhat wilted, the thorns on the stem were still sharp. Suddenly pricked, he withdrew his finger, the sting causing him to squint at his fingertip, where a drop of bright red blood began to ooze. The droplet grew larger, eventually forming a thin stream of blood that quietly trailed down his finger in the darkness. He paid it no mind, for the darkness calmed him, and pain would awaken him. Kanye didn't know whether to trust her reason or her feelings. Another sleepless night had left her pale, with dark circles under her eyes. Since returning from his office building yesterday, she had been sitting on the sofa in a daze, not even changing out of her clothes and shoes. The black long dress and stockings had been on her all night. She knew she couldn't calm down and think rationally, her mind was tangled with countless thoughts, and she couldn't figure out how to sort them out. Was all of this really a complete deception? Were all the separations and reunions premeditated by him? Just thinking about this made her tears well up again, and she lowered her head, sobbing softly. She inadvertently noticed her ankle, where a faint black tattoo of his name was visible on her delicate bone structure. He had released her in the woods, yet tied this black thread around her ankle, making it impossible for her to escape his control no matter where she ran. She couldn't judge which of his words were true and which were lies. She longed to know where Victor was now. When she had questioned him in his office yesterday, he hadn't given her a definite answer. "Miss Gianna, it seems Mr. Friedrich has returned. I saw his car," Evelyn said, a hint of panic in her voice as she rushed into the room from the yard. Kanye suddenly looked up at the door, noticing that the large wooden door was not fully closed, and a slender black figure had already flashed behind the inner door of the shutters. She watched him enter the hall, unable to see his face because he didn't, as usual, remove his black leather boots and uniform coat after stepping into the house. This time, he didn't even take off his hat. The black brim obscured half of his face, making his chin appear even sharper. He stood at the entrance like an immovable statue. She lowered her head, looking at the dark floor and the corner of the coffee table. He began to walk towards her, the sound of his black leather boots echoing rhythmically on the floor. She sat upright on the sofa, and although she didn't look at him, she could clearly hear his footsteps, her heart racing in sync with his pace. He stopped a few steps away from her, first remaining silent for a moment, then spoke in a detached tone, "This is the key to the house." He opened his gloved hand, revealing a dark greenish-black brass key resting in his palm. She instinctively glanced at his palm, but he ignored her look of surprise and continued, "The chef, the gardener, the maid. If you want to dismiss them, feel free. However, even if you do dismiss them, they won't report to my office the next morning." After saying this, he slightly bent down and gently placed the key on the coffee table in front of her. She was even more astonished, her black eyes fixed on his face, and for a moment, their eyes met. Yet, there was no hint of guilt on his face, only absolute indifference. His blue eyes showed no sign of emotion. This man was still so handsome, with a high nose and deep-set eyes, his pupils a cold blue. But suddenly, she felt he was so unfamiliar. He was so close, just a few steps away, yet it felt as if they were separated by centuries. Instantly, her tears burst forth like a dam breaking. This time, he also didn't give her a chance to speak. "I won't come here again." His voice was somewhat hoarse, a cold smile playing at the corners of his lips as he lightly pointed his index finger at her forehead. "From now on, this house will belong to you alone." "You?" She was completely stunned. What did he mean? Was he fully admitting to her accusations, or was it something else? In any case, everything was beyond her expectations. She even thought that perhaps he really had some unspeakable secret, that there was some misunderstanding between them. If he had made a strong effort to explain, providing her with reasonable reasons, she might even consider continuing to trust him. But he didn't explain a single word, not one. She suddenly felt flustered. Why had the entire world turned upside down in an instant? Clearly, he was the one who had deceived her, she was the one who should have confronted him, who should have accused him. He hadn't given her any opportunity to accuse or question him, not even leaving her time to understand the current situation. Perhaps she should stop him and ask for clarity immediately, but the little dignity she had left prevented her from standing up from the sofa and continuing to question him. Instead, she lowered her head, no longer looking at him, biting her lip tightly to suppress the urge to cry, yet from the corner of her eye, she saw him standing still for a few seconds before turning to leave. That slender black figure was like the wind, coming swiftly and leaving just as quickly, without a trace of concern. The maid Evelyn quietly approached the hall, seeing the black-haired girl curled up stiffly on the sofa, her dark eyes filled with glistening tears. She looked so fragile and pitiful, crying so sorrowfully. Evelyn's tone was somewhat guilty. "Gianna, what happened when you went to the city yesterday?" "Oh God, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have told you that the Sir's car came back here that evening." "It's not your fault, Evelyn. You don't need to blame yourself. In fact, I should thank you for giving me the chance to know the truth." Kanye hesitated, wiping the tears from her cheeks. "I think we have to part ways." "What did you say?" "I don't want to stay here any longer." "Where do you plan to go?" "Home." "Home?" "Back to South Africa." Evelyn covered her mouth, her face one of disbelief. "Oh my God, yes, Evelyn, I want to go home. There should be a ship to home from the northern port city. I just don't know if my documents will allow me to leave smoothly." She nodded, looking into the maid's brown eyes. "Are you really determined to leave here?" Kanye lowered her eyes, not answering the maid's question. In fact, she didn't know what else she could do besides leaving. She only knew that when he wanted to disappear, he would vanish completely. Even though she clearly knew his office was in that 3-story building at Brussels Square, knowing the location of his office, he wouldn't leave her any opportunity. Evelyn stepped forward and took her hand, her brown eyes filled with sincere light. "If you are really determined, I am willing to help you. You helped me when I was in my most difficult time, now it's my turn to repay you. I can help you find a way to the northern port." I have a relative who works as a sailor on a ship, he should be able to get a ticket. After a pause, she continued, but first, we need to go to the capital train station. Thank you, Evelyn. Kanye forced a smile, feeling very grateful, but could only manage a strained grin. Shall we rest well today and set off tomorrow? No, I want to leave now. Kanye stood up from the sofa, feeling completely numb, dragging her heavy steps up the stairs to her bedroom. In fact, her luggage was very simple. The most important things left in this house were all in the second drawer of that cabinet. She knelt on the floor and gently pulled open the drawer. The top layer held an old kipao, though the fabric was of high quality and a gift from an old friend. It was still a worn and incomplete garment, unnecessary to keep. A small paper bag, which she unfolded, contained a couple of dark green jasmine fragrance pieces, the faint aroma of tea wafting up. In the past, she had been reluctant to drink it, only using a few pieces to refresh herself when she was most tired. Now it was unnecessary to take it with her. After returning to her hometown, the ancestral home had several acres of fine tea gardens, 2 manuscripts, one of which she had proofread, but had not had the mood to edit the other half, which she would have to leave for later. At the very back of the drawer, in a rectangular oil paper package, there was a sum of cash. If she remembered correctly, it was 20,000 imperial marks. She spread a large handkerchief on the floor and took out the 2 manuscripts when suddenly, a small red velvet box fell to the ground. She froze for a moment, her heart inexplicably stirring, and casually placed the box in the pocket of her dress. Suddenly feeling a tickling sensation at her feet, she turned to see Teddy whining and rubbing its furry body against her foot. "Little one, we have to part ways too." She picked up the puppy, holding it against her cheek, kissing it repeatedly. "I'm sorry, I can't take you on a month-long ship journey, I can't take you back home." The puppy seemed to understand her words, whimpering while licking the salty tears from her cheeks. She put a thin leather collar on Teddy and handed it to the capable maid, who had always taken good care of it. Evelyn had already packed the suitcase and stood in the hall, looking serious as she waited for her. Kanye felt as if she had forgotten something, but she held back and never turned back. The driver took them to the train station, and this usually quiet man said goodbye to her with a single sentence. She ignored him and didn't say goodbye, getting out of the car and walking towards the waiting room of the train station, with Evelyn following behind her, pulling the suitcase. The train was delayed, and they spent several hours in the crowded, dirty waiting room. Kanye drank a little water and nibbled on a piece of black bread that Evelyn had handed her. Finally, around 5 o'clock, the conductor began notifying everyone that the northbound train had arrived, asking passengers to wait on the platform. They followed the crowd onto the platform, where a steam locomotive was parked, and there were quite a few soldiers in black uniforms on the platform. Kanye suddenly remembered that just a few months ago, she had taken a train from the south to the capital, and it was on this platform that she had stepped off the train, dragging her heavy luggage when a small squad of black-clad SS soldiers approached her, led by that handsome man who had so domineeringly embraced her and kissed her lips passionately. Back then, she had felt like a happy little dove, eager to fly to his side. Now, she felt like a sorrowful wild goose, adrift and unanchored. Suddenly, a sharp gunshot broke her thoughts, and the crowd waiting on the platform erupted into chaos. A few more gunshots followed, and the guards sounded the alarm. In the distance on the platform, someone fell to the ground, and others rushed past her, including plainclothes police and SS soldiers in black uniforms. Kanye was pushed to the ground, and as she struggled to get up, she saw Evelyn already about 10 meters away from her. The chaotic crowd began to surge out of the two platform exits like a flood that had burst its banks, and she watched helplessly as she and Evelyn were swept further apart. When the chaos subsided, Kanye found herself alone, standing in the square outside the waiting room. All her luggage, cash, and documents were in the suitcase that Evelyn had been carrying. She clutched the few coins left in her pocket and went to the phone booth to call the villa, but no one answered. She also went to the train station's broadcasting room to send a message looking for someone, but it was already packed with people. The petite and fragile her couldn't even get in line. After a while, the small iron window closed, and a black-clad train conductor behind the window put up a sign that read "Closed, come back tomorrow." In the crowd waiting in line, people in front angrily pounded on the door and windows of the broadcasting room, but it was useless. Kanye vaguely remembered that Evelyn had once mentioned her mother's house's location. Perhaps there was a glimmer of hope to find Evelyn there. So she walked along the street, following the signs. Even in early autumn, the night wind turned a bit chilly after dark. At 10 o'clock, the city began its curfew. Around 9, she finally arrived at the dilapidated apartment building that Evelyn had mentioned. After much effort, she knocked on the door, but the landlady said there was no woman named Evelyn living there, let alone a sick mother. She thought she must have remembered incorrectly. Before the curfew, she needed to find a place to stay and arrived at a hotel. But she had only a few coins on her, and no matter how she assured and explained, even pleading desperately, the hotel owner clearly had no intention of taking her in, a penniless foreign woman without any documents. The old grandfather clock in the hotel lobby chimed, dong dong 10 times, like a death knell. She knew well what the consequences would be if she were still on the street after curfew. She had to plead again for a while, but the short, stout man hiding behind the counter, with his cunning black eyes, refused to relent, and his tone grew increasingly impatient. Suddenly, she remembered the small red velvet box in her dress pocket. After hesitating for a moment, her hand reached for the box. "This young lady is with me," a gentle yet magnetic male voice sounded behind her. "I can pay for her room." Kanye turned around, and what met her eyes was a handsome man with lake blue eyes. She was taken aback and called out his name, "Marcus." "You see, sir, it's not about the money. She has no identification, and the checks have been quite strict lately." The innkeeper appeared somewhat troubled. He smiled at her with his eyes, pulled out a wallet from his trench coat pocket, took out a stack of cash, and placed it on the innkeeper's tall wooden counter, gently pushing it forward. "Of course, this isn't about money. The identification issue is indeed a hassle, but if anyone comes asking, I can vouch for her. Mr. Luria, please make it convenient for her." He added, "Do you think my identity and reputation are insufficient to act as a guarantor?" "All right, I certainly trust you, Lieutenant Pearl." The innkeeper accepted the bills and tucked them into a rusty, battered cash box. Marcus pulled her to a corner of the lobby. "How could you be wandering the streets? Do you know how dangerous that is?" His tone, which had been calm and gentle just moments ago, became somewhat agitated. However, he noticed her eyes were vacant. He held her hands, which were also cold, and stopped asking questions. He quickly took off his coat and wrapped it around her frail shoulders. His coat carried a faint scent of perfume, a mix of fresh lemon and basil, along with a lingering hint of sandalwood. For some reason, this fragrance reminded her of her brother Victor, who always had a subtle smell of ink and sawdust about him. These two scents were not similar at all, yet she couldn't help but lean against his shoulder and began to cry softly like a little dog. Suddenly, she threw herself into his arms. He was taken aback, and his lake blue eyes deepened. The girl in his embrace was so petite and adorable, her delicate body trembling continuously. He tightened his hold, wanting to give her some strength and warmth. He led her into a room, turned on the warm yellow light on the wall. Kanye knew he had wrapped his arm around her shoulder and brought her into his room. It was a small suite, with somewhat outdated furniture and facilities. The windows were tightly shut, covered with thick curtains, making it feel a bit stuffy. But she paid no mind to this, sitting on the sofa and starting to cry again. The moment he said that, I felt like the whole world was collapsing. She cried so hard that her words became choked. "I want to go home, I don't want to stay here anymore. Regardless, he shouldn't have put you in danger." His fingertips cautiously brushed through her black hair. Her strands were soft, with a silky touch, yet it felt like an electric current passing through his fingers. He quickly withdrew his hand, stood up, and walked to the small kitchen in the suite. He took a very clean glass from the iron rack, filled it with water, and placed it in front of her. Kanye took it with both hands, her slender fingers cradling the transparent glass, feeling that the water inside was warm. "Look at you, how many milliliters of tears you've shed. Drink some water," he said with a smile. She looked at him with tear-filled eyes, her throat parched. She tilted her head back and drank all the water in the glass. "Marcus, how did you end up here? Perhaps the moon god heard your call and knew you needed help, so it brought me to your side," he said, a slight smile playing on his lips. "Just a joke." As you can see, I rented this small apartment for convenience and don't come back often. If you wish, you can stay here. Thank you. Kanye glanced around, feeling a bit suffocated in her chest and dizzy. She instinctively covered her chest. You see, I was so busy talking to you that I forgot to open the window for some fresh air. He got up, walked to the door, dimmed the lights in the room, and turned to look at Kanye sitting on the long sofa. This room is too small, it can get stuffy when the weather is hot. He walked to the window and gently pulled back the heavy curtains. A cool breeze flowed in through the narrow window. She took a deep breath and looked outside. This should be the second floor. Tonight the night sky was gloomy, with no moon or stars visible, only the dim yellow light of a street lamp flickering among the dark shadows of the trees. Whether it was because she was tired from crying or the water had taken effect, she soon curled up on the sofa and fell asleep. However, it seemed she was constantly disturbed by nightmares, her beautiful brown eyebrows faintly furrowed. This woman was so delicate, petite, innocent, kind-hearted, and trusting. I'm sorry, my little swan. His right hand slipped into her black hair again, that enchanting touch making his fingertips linger for a moment, gliding down her head, gently brushing over her arm, her top, her waist, and her skirt. Suddenly, his fingers were blocked by something hard. He reached into her skirt pocket and pulled out a familiar red velvet box. Carefully opening it, he found a pair of pristine white pearl earrings inside. He stared at the earrings with his lake blue eyes, the emotions in his gaze no longer needing to be concealed, for the girl was now asleep. He had no intention of harming her, he merely searched her for safety reasons, initially thinking that the hard box contained a listening device or something similar, only to discover it was the pair of pearl earrings he had given her. Why was she carrying this with her? And in such a critical situation, why didn't she use these earrings as collateral to exchange for her temporary safety from that greedy innkeeper? She was too pure, too kind, like a flawless mirror, making any ugliness, hypocrisy, and filth unable to hide before her. He gazed at her, his lake blue eyes deepening again, like a clear blue pond. He had to admit that this Eastern girl possessed an indescribable charm. But he forced himself to snap out of this brief daze. He would not forget his purpose. Since that unexpected encounter on the train, he had been secretly approaching this girl, orchestrating several meetings, looking for an opportunity to take revenge on that man. He suddenly realized he might have made a mistake. He quickly walked to the window, and through the gap in the curtains, he saw a black car parked at the street corner, with several plainclothes police officers surrounding it. At this moment, the one who should truly be worried was himself. The black car that had been tailing her contained none other than himself, General Friedrich Albert von Ryan of the SS. Marcus was taken aback. His actions had always been swift and secretive, with strict guards at all times. More frightening was that the secret police organization he commanded was all-encompassing. Finding a weakness in such a man was incredibly difficult, but everyone had weaknesses, unless they were angels without desires or devils with no redeeming qualities. From her fragmented cries, he had roughly gathered what had happened. That man might have already known she would come to him, using this incident to convey a message. He had no weaknesses and wanted him to know that everything was already under his control. But why did he choose to appear at this moment? If it was merely to take his life, he would have long been dead under the black guns of the snipers lying in ambush. Perhaps, even with control over the Empire's secret police and intelligence agencies, he still had some reservations about his arch-nemesis, the king of espionage, Flame Callus. That man knew that Callus's subordinates had visited him several times to dig up evidence of his past arms smuggling, corruption, and assassination of colleagues, yet he did not know that he had not shared this information. Wasn't it the most delightful thing to have these two schemers mutually restraining and plotting against each other? Marcus smiled, gently closing the curtains. His lake blue gaze shifted from the black night outside to the girl lying on the sofa. The strength of his opponent had long been anticipated, yet the appearance of this girl was unexpected. Under the influence of the sleeping pills, she lay with her eyes closed, sleeping soundly. Crystal tears still clung to her long eyelashes, like a sleeping angel. Her complete trust in him made him suddenly not want her to suffer any harm. When he was with her, everything became so simple, just like when he first met her. He began to think of ways to make her smile because he liked seeing her happy, just as he had just given her a glass of water laced with sleeping pills, not planning any ulterior motives, but simply not wanting to see her cry so heartbreakingly. A sudden urgent phone ring interrupted his thoughts. Marcus walked over to the phone, decisively picked up the receiver, and held it to his ear but did not speak. A vague male voice came from the other end. "Lieutenant Marcus Pearl, please come to the door to confirm your room service." "Hello." He was about to inquire when the other party had already hung up. Marcus alertly drew his gun, lowered his footsteps, and cautiously approached the door. With one hand holding the gun and the other pushing the door open, he found no one outside, only a white envelope on the ground. He glanced around, bent down, and quickly picked up the envelope. On the white paper was only a line of black typewritten text, clearly not handwritten but printed with a typewriter. He gently touched the last letter's thick stroke with his fingertip. The ink was still wet. "What's meant to come will eventually come," Marcus muttered to himself, confirming the contents of the note once more, a meaningful smile rising at the corners of his lips. The meeting place was an old, dilapidated church. Marcus, dressed in a grey-black uniform, pushed through the dark wooden doors and stepped into the hall of the building. The statue on the altar was mottled and worn from years of neglect, and the stained glass windows in the dome were shattered. He walked lightly towards the altar, clasped his hands together, closed his eyes, and prayed to the statue. Moonlight streamed through the broken skylight, casting a faint silvery glow on the marble floor, illuminating the remnants of the crumbling walls. A slender man in black appeared, pointing a black pistol directly at him, pressing it against his temple. He emerged from the shadows with such light footsteps that they were almost imperceptible, yet his movements were as swift as lightning. "Marcus Pearl, Lieutenant," the man said, swiftly hooking his belt buckle with one hand, disarming him in an instant. "What a pleasure!" He was like a black panther, suddenly attacking from the darkness, instantly gripping the opponent's throat with his white teeth, his voice filled with a threatening tone. "When did the SS start sending generals to personally apprehend people?" Marcus remained calm, not panicking despite the gun pressed against his temple, his tone still somewhat teasing. After disarming his opponent, he skillfully removed the bullets from the chamber with one hand, the bullets clattering onto the marble floor, and the gun was tossed into the ruins nearby. The man in black moved closer to Marcus, his sharp chin on the left side of his handsome face, his ice blue eyes glinting with cold light. "If you don't want to cause trouble, then get lost." Marcus chuckled lightly, tilting his head to meet the cold gaze of the man. "If you think I've violated any laws, you can arrest me, but it's best to send me to the military court of the National Defense Army." A faint smile appeared on his lips, as if he didn't perceive the danger in his actions. "Of course, you could also throw me directly into a concentration camp, General Ryan. That's the privilege of your SS Division 4. You should understand what I mean. Stay away from her." He glared coldly at Marcus, the provocative words from his opponent failing to stir his anger or throw him off balance. It's hard to believe that a mastermind would come down from the shadows to the forefront. Marcus lowered his lake blue eyes. "It's a pity, I don't want to involve anyone in a scandal. I just can't bear to see a poor girl wandering the streets, used as bait without her knowledge." "What right do you have to say that to me?" The man in black pulled the trigger, the cold muzzle pressing into Marcus's deep brown hair, against his skull. "Do you think this gun won't go off? If you were determined to kill me, you wouldn't have waited until now to act. The fact that I'm still alive means there's a reason for it." Marcus closed his eyes, tilting his head slightly back against the gun, his brown eyelashes fluttering. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.